Do you want to test? Probably. No.
This is a test. Yeah, I think this is good.
Okay, perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have another meeting that's happening downstairs, and they may join us in a moment, but I would like to keep the schedule on track. It's 1 o'clock, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all here to America's National Churchill Museum at Westminster College for this Fellows Weekend. My name is Tim Riley. I'm the Director and Chief Curator here at the museum, and this is a really extraordinary afternoon. For those of you who participated in the guided tour by Steve Stinson, who is illustrated on the screen here, thank you, Steve, for coming back to the scene of the crime and sharing with us your valuable insights on this historic place and historic building. I would like to say that this is the construction work that you see and the preservation effort that is going on with this remarkable building is a part of a multi-phased period. And we're coming to the finish line of one phase, and we're about to embark on the start line of another. And we'll talk a little bit about that in our first session here today. But before I do, I'd like to pause for a moment. We are dedicating this Churchill Fellows Weekend Colloquium session this Friday afternoon to one of our Churchill Fellows that we sadly lost in February rather suddenly, and that's Richard Langworth. Some of you know Richard. His name in the Churchill world is legendary. He was a scholar. He knew and devoted most of his life to studying and talking about Winston Churchill. And we miss him dearly. The Churchill world has changed forever. But we would like to acknowledge and remember Richard Langworth, one of our fellows, with honoring him with this colloquium today. I think he would have enjoyed it a great deal. By means of introduction to our first session, we titled this, "We Shape Our Buildings, and Afterwards They Shape Us." That was a quote by Winston Churchill. He was referring to the rebuilding of the House of Commons after it was destroyed in the Blitz, and knew that buildings and architecture were a great labor for those who built them, but afterwards the buildings, especially symbolic buildings, shape all of us. And that is certainly the case with this very special building, the Church of St. Mary Virgin Aldermanbury, a Christopher Wren designed church that was relocated from central London to mid-Missouri and rebuilt on the campus of Westminster College in the 1960s. Winston Churchill knew about this project. And this is a letter he wrote to Westminster College saying that he thought it an imaginative concept. Randolph Churchill, his great-grandson, in October said, "We were bonkers for bringing over this church." But I think in hindsight, it was the great move. And I think that's important to recognize that Winston Churchill endorsed not only this move of this great piece of architecture from London to Fulton, but also, in his mind, may it be a symbol for the hopes and peace of mankind. And it really was an optimistic outlook and something that we take very seriously, and one worth preserving. I'd like to kick off with the past and then turn it over to Angie, who's going to talk about the present and the future. Angie Gaebler, who is our amazing architect and preservation specialist from the Kansas City-based firm STRATA Architecture Preservation. Angie has been working with this building for almost over 10 years now, and she knows every crack and nook and cranny, some of which she'll tell us about in a minute. But I have the privilege of reminding everyone a little bit about what the church looked like before it came to Fulton. On December 29th, 1940, during one of the greatest raids of the Blitz, the Germans dropped 20,000 incendiary bombs over London. It rained down fire. Winston Churchill said, "At all costs, save St. Paul's." They did. St. Paul's was spared. The fires that rained down were put out, and that iconic dome that stands over London was preserved. Churchill knew full well that if the dome of St. Paul's went down, so would the British morale. Unfortunately, this church, St. Mary the Virgin Aldermanbury, did not meet the same fate. In fact, it was gutted. You can see in the image on the left, the fire wardens the next day are slowly putting out the fires. The church stood in ruins in London for 20 years. The post-war economy in the UK was such they couldn't afford to rebuild it. They really couldn't afford to take it down. It stood as an eyesore in the city of London for many, many, many years. And you can see it right here. And Angie noted something extraordinary about this building, and the question came up during the tour earlier, which parts are preserved and which parts are original and so forth. Angie, you can point out, you're the architecture historian here. What do we see in this image?
Yeah, sure. So when we had the tour with Steve this morning, there were a lot of questions about the windows and about what came here, right, to the church. So I thought this was a great photograph to show you what they brought with them. So when these churches were originally built, you can see the rubble stone. This is not like the stone that we see on the outside face of the church, right? So they would build rubble stone walls and then face them with what we call cut stone or finished stone. And so when you look outside, the stone that they brought with them is what you see out here. They did not bring the rubble stone, so the backup stone is what we call it. So that stayed, that was probably thrown into a landfill. But the outside stone is what we brought. Some of the other things that are really interesting to note, and you can really see it here, is that there were questions about these windows. So these windows are based, like Steve told everybody this morning, on other historic Wren churches from lithographs and drawings that we have of the churches. So the ones that you see in here are what we consider to be very accurate reproductions of historic Wren windows. But later, like in the Victorian era, they came through and made this look more like what you would consider a cathedral, right? They added stone tracery in the openings, and you can see the double arches here, and then they added stained glass windows. So this, you can imagine from in here, it looked very different. That original Wren, clean, crisp, very conservative window type was turned into stained glass windows with stone tracery to look more like a Victorian era church. The other thing they did was they added this railing across the top of cut stone that was also an add, and it never showed up until probably, I think, around the early to mid 1800s. So those pieces, when Sisson helped design this project, decided to not bring those non-original pieces with them. So those pieces that were added to the church later after Wren's design were not brought here. So this is meant to be a pure Wren restoration. So.
College officials had their pick of about 33 Wren churches, or other, not all Wren, but churches in the City of London. And they chose this one because in many ways it was well suited. Westminster College had a chapel on the college campus called Swope Chapel, not far from the gymnasium, the historic gymnasium where Churchill gave the speech. But in the 1960s, some of you alums will know, that building was slowly slipping down the hill. So on the one hand, this is a wonderful memorial and tribute to Winston Churchill, but it's also a practical need for the college. They needed a new chapel, and this one fit the bill. It was the right size. You can see on the right-hand side, I think the college president looking at the ruins from the inside of the church in the 1960s. Harry Davidson, right. This is one of my favorite images from our archives. This is the construction sign that stood on the site in the 1960s. And if you look on the right, you'll see architect Christopher Wren. You don't see that very often. At least, I don't know, Angie, if you see that very often in your line of work. But it was a wonderful move. But I think also important to note here on this slide is the honorary chairs of the project. President Kennedy was the first honorary chairman of this project. When he was assassinated, President Johnson came on board. Presidents Eisenhower and Truman also backed this project. It was a national effort in the 1960s to make this happen and to raise funds. Steve tells great stories of going to St. Louis with his father or New York. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Richard Burton, so many celebrities got involved to raise funds and awareness for this project. It was a national effort, and those presidents joined Winston Churchill in endorsing the project that made it happen. This man, is this? Renzo Palmer. Renzo Palmer was the master mason, the lead mason on the project. He was the first on the site in the morning and the last to leave, according to Steve. And here he is, and it gives you a glimpse here of the people who were involved in making this. And you can see the church rising on the campus in the distance, and he's holding one of the numbered stones. Present. The building is a beautiful one, and it photographs well. It's extraordinarily photogenic, but looks can be deceiving. If you look closely at the church over the years, as we did when I arrived here at Westminster College in 2016, I was smitten with the building. But as we lived with it and worked with it, we began to notice some cracks and some leaks. And in the morning, we'd see small bits of stone that had fallen off the walls on the outside of the church. That led me to believe something was wrong, and we needed to find someone or some agency or some firm to come in and really look and study the church to see what was needed. And that's where Angie really and her crew at STRATA from Kansas City stepped up and began to look closely at the church and began to see some of the need for preservation. Not only was the stone discolored in some cases, but much more. Angie, this is where you can tell us what you found.
Okay, so we started in 2015. One of the first things we did was we hired a consultant to come in and scan the building. So this is early, back in 2015, where it was kind of a new technology still. And we had the whole building 3D scanned, and we were able to do very accurate drawings to show every stone. We were able to do our assessment from it, and they're really beautiful drone flights as well. So we started with that so that we would have a really good base. We went back and we researched. We went through the archives here. Steve was talking this morning about Sisson's numbered drawings. So we went through those to understand the system for what was brought back. One of the things I didn't show you on that other historic photograph was that the north side of this building, we discovered, if you go outside and look, the stone on this side's very clean and very precise, because the north side of the building, when it was originally built, they saved money. They did a little value engineering, Wren did, and the most of the north side of the church and part of the west side and the base of the tower were all fake stone. So it was like a parging material that was scored to look like stone, but because it was so close to the building next door and not visible in the public right-of-way, they VE'd this early on, clear back in the 1600s. So pretty interesting. But what that meant was in the 1960s, when they brought the church over here, they had to have more stone quarried, right? So they went to the original quarry, they got enough stone to send it back over, and they sent the replacement stone that they needed to finish this 360 degrees and shipped it here. So they had the stone here that they needed. It wasn't in good order, but they had what they needed. So that's one reason that you'll notice that the north side of this is different. And we were able to determine this through those numbered drawings and a few of those historic photos to really see that that rubble stone I showed you on the inside was used everywhere on the north and west sides. So when you look at this and you look at the reconstruction of this, you really dig into the 1960s drawings that Sternberg did alongside Sisson. So Sternberg was our US architect and Sisson was in England. So you go through those drawings, you really look, you try to learn the building system. So the first thing we do is figure out how is this built, right? It's a steel structure. In between the steel are like a hollow clay tile, and then it's clad with that stone that you see outside. So it's a very different building system than what we had here, but it looks identical when you're in here, and that's the point. They did a wonderful job reconstructing this church. So one of the things we discovered when we were hired in 2015 is we did a full exterior assessment, and we looked inside the church to see how the inside and outside were working together, and then we produced a report. And so that report is here, and we cover all the major systems and major building components. And what we discovered was water, moisture, was really the driving issue here in this building, right? We're getting water through the walls because the masonry hadn't been repointed properly, and since it was built, we were getting water through the roof because of leaks. That roof that's up there is a lead-coated copper, and a lot of the seams have opened up. Things have moved over time. It has a lot of hail damage. Things had broken loose. So they have done a lot of temporary repairs up there over the years. Some of the other things that we looked at, obviously the deck is the major thing. So this building has leaked since it was built. The first major repair project, you guys, this opened in 1969. The first major repair project we find in the archives is 1974. 5 years. But we have a lot better waterproofing systems now. So we go through the drawings, we understand the history, we go through and understand the process, like what have they been doing to keep this building maintained over the years. And so that's all covered in our report. They'd gone through 4 or 5 different campaigns to try to waterproof the deck outside, and the last one was in 2002, I think. So you guys, since it was built in 1969, 4 or 5 campaigns to fix that deck. He has a really good picture. Do you want to go to the next one? So this is outside when we tore out the west steps. This is over the gallery where Churchill's paintings are.
And here's the gallery down
Yes.
below. And this is an image we don't often see or share, and it is a curator's nightmare. There's about 1.5 inches of water in the galleries that had seeped in from above, but also there was hydrostatic flooding from below. The museum is a basement. So we saw the best of, or the worst of both worlds, water coming down from on high, but also water seeping up from the bottom. And that's when we realized we really had to do something. We were one perfect storm with the right wind from this happening again and again and again. This was not an everyday occurrence. I should be straight with you on that, but this was a perfect storm when the wind was blowing the right way, and we saw some catastrophic flooding in the museum, and we knew we needed to do something to alleviate the water damage. The church had been destroyed by fire twice. We didn't want a flood to take it out next.
We did discuss we'd rather have a flood than a fire.
True.
But yes, we don't want either. So, one of our first things, so they undertook this project outside here, what we call the Big Dig, and waterproofed, right, and put a lot of drainage and things in place to set us up for this next project. So, we identified during that first study not only the water infiltration with the deck and the roof, issues with the windows, obviously the masonry, but also that there were mechanical and electrical code issues and issues with the efficiency and being able to control humidity both up here and downstairs. We also identified ADA deficiencies, and then we set priorities and pricing in this booklet. So once they got this phase of work done, then we had COVID, right? And during COVID, it did, after COVID and during COVID, open up some opportunities for some different grants. And because tourism here had declined during COVID, we were eligible, the college was eligible to apply for this grant. And so we were able to use the report that we did, which had prioritized and costed projects back in 2017, and prioritize those projects for this grant. So we worked with a grant writer very closely, and we're able to get the largest grant I have ever seen for a restoration project in my 30 years for $1.9 million from the EDA. Which is huge. And then that was matched by donors for another $1.9 million. And so what you're seeing here today is the culmination of that grant. So we worked to put together a set of documents. Once we knew we had the grant, we finalized our documents to match the grant amount, and we put it out to bid. The grant covered really the masonry, the deck restoration projects, new railings, exterior lighting, a new ramp, and new offices downstairs for staff. So the whole project we put out to bid. We've been working on this now for almost a year, but not quite. And we've had a really wonderful team of general contractor and subcontractors and historic preservation specialists on this project. I have been doing another project alongside this one that's very similar. I've been working at the National World War I Museum in Kansas City. I've been doing their exterior rehab work now since 2012. And similar to this, we put together a master plan and we've checked off projects, and we just finished our last project. We've done about $20 million of exterior work. And I tell people all the time, they're like, well, what do you do? And I said, well, if I do a good job, you will never know I was there, right? You should not know I was there. What we're trying to do is restore and protect these historic buildings. It is not sexy architecture work. I'm not doing cool designs. I'm fixing. So when we come in here, we're hands-on with the masons, we're hands-on with the waterproofing contractors, we're hands-on with the electricians about how to get, electrical from here to there where you won't see it. And so what you're seeing outside is our year of exterior masonry restoration, which was very carefully done by contractors who were just painstaking. Every stone, you guys, we looked at. And then we've been waterproofing the decks that have leaked since 1969. And it's been going really well. We did have a concrete pour out here, and what you're seeing right now is that that's being torn out. We rejected. It was just kind of one of those flukes, and the finish didn't go very well, so we did ask them to replace that. So we had anticipated hoping to have this done, but we're a little behind because they're doing very good work, and they want to be very proud of it when we're finished. So right now we're doing the concrete, the decks, the masonry. Once we're finished, new railings will go around the outside. The railings that were on the perimeter up here did not meet current life safety building code and actually provided a step where people could get up there and fall off very easily. So we're putting new railings, and we've designed it a little different, but very much in keeping with the historic railings to make them safe. We'll have better lighting outside and a new ADA ramp and new entry over here for people to come in on the north side. So we're really excited that this project should be wrapping up here in the next couple months. But we got to think about the future, right? So the study that we identified in 2017 had additional items that we were not able to fund with that first phase that we're doing right now. And that includes roof repairs and a major HVAC project. You guys can feel how humid it is in here today and how hard it is for them to control the temperature. There are a lot of factors. Part of it is that these systems are old, and they were designed, and the ductwork and everything was installed in 1960s. So it is time for a complete HVAC overhaul. We also would like to explore the option of adding fire protection and life safety egress for downstairs for visitors. One of the big factors in this is the windows. Obviously, they're one of the biggest character-defining features of this building. The windows are magnificent. And when people come here and talk, they talk about the light. They talk about the beauty of the windows and the glass. So it is something that we need to restore. The windows are very deteriorated. The steel frames are rusting. The lead cames are tired. They're past their useful life. And they do need a complete restoration offsite in a workshop. And storm windows. We're also hoping that with the storm windows we can add a little UV protection. If you look around, you'll notice that the wood in here is bleached. It's particularly, affecting the historic carvings and things that are in here. But being able to put a little UV protection on these windows would go a long way. Also kind of help with a little bit of the heat gain that we're getting through the south windows. So that next phase of work, we're looking at doing the HVAC, life safety, a little bit more accessibility, egress downstairs, and the windows. So that's kind of the next phase. And you can see in this picture, like the windows up top, they have a steel frame. And when we get warm air in here that's humid and it's cold outside, it literally rains inside these windows. It is completely wet all day long. You can wipe it off, it comes right back. But the steel frames have really suffered. These are some pictures of the roof. They have some temporary kind of panning in here with an EPDM that they've put in place because the metal underneath here is deteriorated. So these do need to kind of be redone. These are the surfaces where we're able to get up and really look at it. And a lot of the flashings around the windows have opened up and need permanent repairs. So there's definitely some things that we can address in the future. This is an attempt to stop water from many years ago. The storm windows are also very old and past their useful life. And again, it's the flashings around the window that are really the issues here. So this is a great picture. So we have a steel frame. If you look at the windows, you can kind of see the vertical steel frames, and there's some horizontal pieces. And then the cames are all lead. And this is kind of a meeting joint where we have the steel supporting the lead and the interaction between the two, where we have a lot of rust and deterioration. The old glazing putty on the windows is shot, and people over the years have tried to fix it with sealants. So it's no wonder that we're getting a lot of air leakage and water infiltration on the windows, but also the condensation is because of the HVAC systems. So this is a quick picture. We just wanted to show you what it looks like above the ceilings downstairs. So it's really difficult to get up here and work on the HVAC systems. This area, we call it a plenum space, is uninsulated, so it's not very efficient. And getting up here to work, this is wire lath. And I don't know if you've ever cut through this, but this is really a pain to cut through. It has plaster that goes through it. And to get up here and work on the HVAC systems once we notice an issue is really difficult. So you have to cut this out and either put an access panel in or patch it. So that HVAC system, when we look at doing replacement and doing something that's more efficient, we will also look at redesigning the ceilings in these spaces, and alongside that with the museum lighting for the exhibits. So it'll be able to take care of several items when we replace that.
Yeah, I think for those of us who are in the building every day, the heating, venting, cooling, air conditioning, and mostly humidity control is extremely important to get right. As Angie showed in the slide earlier, the condensation that happens in the wintertime when it's really, really dry outside, but we're pumping humidity into the church, there really is rain on the inside of these windows. There's condensation, and that causes damage. But also, it's not good for the woodwork. These lovely, lovely historic carvings, the lime wood above the altar, the light-colored lime wood by Arthur Ayres, the wonderful British sculptor who did these, are beginning to show where, if you look to the left on the angel, the little putti on the left, his wing that's sticking up, it cracked. That's due to the fluctuation in humidity. We have to get that right. And that's why this part of the process is so crucial and critical for the next, to make sure that the interior and the woodwork is preserved with the same care that we gave to the exterior. So that's what's on the horizon. It was a fixer-upper when we found it, and we're still fixing it up. But it's worth it. It really is an extraordinary church, and I think I'd like to before we turn it over to questions for Angie, end with where we began with Winston Churchill and his endorsement. And this is the reason we do what we do. This is an imaginative concept, he said, and it may long represent the hopes and be a symbol for the hopes for peace for mankind, and of course, the great Anglo-American relation. So that's why we do what we do and why we're making investments to inspire the next generations to study Winston Churchill, to study the past, to preserve it, and to learn from it, most importantly. Thank you, Angie, for not only today, but everything you've done for this building. You and your team have just gone above and beyond. Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Was there ever any evidence or indication that the church prior to the bombing in World War II was having the same problems from the 1600s?
I might say anecdotally, however, we do have a lot of British visitors who come who are fans of Christopher Wren and have seen all the parish churches in London and often say, well, yours looks so new. It's all relative.
We did this study in 2017. We did have a wood conservator come in and look at all of the wood here, and he had spent a year living in churches in England, studying all of the Grinling-Gibbons sculptures and wood artifacts, and he was really adamant that the humidity and the UV here be better monitored and controlled in order to protect these for the future. So we got $1.9 million grant from the EDC. It was a Department of Commerce grant for tourism, and then that was matched with donors for $1.9 million. So this first phase project is about $3.8. Yeah, as we design that second project, we'll know a little bit more about what that looks like. We generally know what the costs will be for the windows. The HVAC system's kind of up in the air. It depends if we're doing all new ceilings and lighting with that. It depends on a lot of different things. Are we doing a fire protection system? Are we adding more egress downstairs? So those are things that will be studied next. Yeah.
Well, just a comment, and it's very important to do the climate control because working here, the organ is very sensitive to humidity and temperature fluctuations. And while I was here, they put in a system in the music room behind it, and that thing failed or something. They were blowing air into the chamber of the organ. And then I don't want to upset my dear friend Steve Stinson, but I never met Renzo Palmer, and that picture was my dear friend Eris Lytle, who came and visited many times when I was working here, the stonemason. And Eris Lytle.
He was wearing Renzo's hat, though. No, Eric Lytle was the man who was the director of putting up the statue the first time it was put here. I forgot all about that.
And there's a stone downstairs in the exhibition where we talk about this in the galleries with his name on it. So one of the historic stones that wasn't used in the reconstruction literally has his name on it. You can see that downstairs.
Grant that you got of $1.9 million, was that under Fletch? Did Fletch get that grant in conjunction with Serena Lowe?
We just got it last year.
Oh, this is okay. Back in the day, when Fletch was the president, he worked in conjunction with a Westminster alum named Serena Lowe to get a very large grant to start.
So I do know that there was a lot of work done in the 80s.
Yeah.
So that might have been associated with that. The predecessor, so the firm I have has been around for 37 years, and the woman that started it used to work for the firm that did that work in the 80s.
Oh,
so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It doesn't have to do with the repair, unfortunately. I was curious, I'm seeing these two little cubicles here, and is there not an outside door on either side here? So back in Christopher Wren's day, what did we see people coming through those doors, or through that door over there, or where did they enter the church, and what are the cubicles all about?
I would assume this is the front of the church at the time. When you look at the front, I think most of the people were in here. So think of these as modern day kind of windlocks. You know, you can imagine if you've sat in here when these doors are open, it can get very cold really quick because heat rises, right? So think of these as modern-day Winlux.
Yes, and I think the other thing, too, that should be said is that Frederick Sternberg and Marshall Sisson in England, when they were reconstructing the church in the 1960s, took great care, as Angie said, to bring back the light of the Wren windows, take out the stained glass, make it look like Wren did, except the organ loft was added, and these vestries were not right where they are today. So we did, in the spirit of Wren in those great 17th century churches, go back, but we did make it our own. In fact, even the window in back where the spiral staircase, that's new. Wren did not design that. It seems like he did, but we did make some changes to it. But you're right, their doors were in the London construction, but we don't use them today. And the organ originally, I think, was down closer to the ground level. The loft is new.
So there was originally no balcony up there in the original church?
Correct.
And then, so how did people get to the spire or the tower? How did they get into that tower area up there where the bell is?
So the stair that we have, the stair that goes downstairs to the museum right now would not have been there. So that stair would have gone up into the tower.
Oh, it would have.
Yeah, and if you go upstairs, it does go up inside the tower. The stair does.
So if you go up to the balcony now, you go
Yeah.
up there from there. But originally, that would have been all the way up.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And some of you know, but if you don't, maybe Lena, if she's so kind, could show us afterwards or stop her. There is a stairwell that goes up to the tower now, and those stones are from the 12th century. They were from the pre-Great Fire stones. They originally, I think, went down into the crypt, and we repurposed them to go up into the tower. So those are some of the oldest steps in North America, by far.
I tell people all the time they're the oldest in Missouri.
Oh, yes. Well, once again, Angie, thank you so much for being with us, and all of you. She's a font of knowledge. If you want to stop her afterwards, or Lena can show you the steps. We'll take a 2-minute break, and then we'll begin our next session then. So thank you so much.